My husband jabbed his finger toward me in front of his mother and ordered, "Apologize to her for those creepy bathroom rituals you've been doing." For a second, I honestly thought he was talking to someone standing behind me. The kitchen's cold overhead light hummed above us, washing the table in a flat, unforgiving white that made every wrinkle on my 52-year-old face feel suddenly exposed. His mother set her fork down a little too loudly, the metal clinking against the plate like a gavel. She didn't look at me. She looked at him, chin tilted, as if she were the offended queen and he was the loyal guard. "I shouldn't have to feel unsafe in my own son's house," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound fragile. I opened the bathroom door and she's standing on the toilet, arms in the air, whispering things. I thought something evil was going on. I stared at her, then at him, the steam from the pot roast curling between us like a barrier. My hands were still damp from washing dishes, and I wiped them on the faded dish towel to keep them from shaking. "I already told you," I said, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't crack. "I do that because you keep walking in on me. I'm fully dressed. I'm not doing anything evil. I'm just tired of being barged in on while I'm using the bathroom." He rolled his eyes, leaning back in his chair. "You're overreacting, Sylvia. Mom said it was an accident." "It's happened 4 times this week," I replied. "Accidents don't repeat on a schedule." His mother finally turned her eyes on me, pale and shiny under the harsh light. She let a beat of silence hang between us, long enough that I could hear the refrigerator buzzing in the next room and my own heartbeat in my ears. Then she smiled. It was small, tight, and never touched her eyes. "You don't have to be so dramatic," she murmured. "I'm old. Sometimes I forget to knock. It's not the end of the world if someone sees you. We're family." That word, family, landed like a stone in my stomach. I swallowed. "It is the end of the world for me, actually. I've told you I can't lock the door. I've explained why." My husband waved a hand as if he were brushing away a fly. "Here we go again with the childhood story." A flash of tiled walls and a tiny airless room flickered at the edge of my mind. My older brother's laugh on the other side of the door, my fists pounding until my knuckles bled. My 5-year-old voice going hoarse from screaming, and no one coming for what felt like hours. Even now, decades later, the idea of turning a lock and hearing it click behind me made my chest tighten. "I'm not telling a story," I said quietly. "I'm telling you why I can't lock the door. Being locked in a bathroom is not a joke to me." Silence fell again. This one felt sharper, like stepping barefoot on glass. He didn't reach for my hand. He didn't even look at me. He glanced sideways at his mother instead. She gave the smallest shrug, as if my trauma were a minor inconvenience, like a squeaky hinge. "Well," she sighed, reaching for her water glass, "we've all had something unpleasant happen to us as children. You don't see me performing whatever that was you were doing with your arms." She mimed lifting her hands, then let them drop with theatrical fear. "I thought you were summoning something." A tiny laugh slipped out of him. Just a breathy exhale through his nose, but I felt it like a slap. "That's not funny," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He turned on me then, his chair scraping against the tile. "What's not funny is you scaring my mother in my house," he snapped. "She came here to rest while her place is being renovated, and instead, she has to deal with you playing games in the bathroom like a teenager." Heat climbed up my neck. I could feel the kitchen clock ticking behind me, counting out each second of my humiliation. "I'm not playing games," I said. "I'm trying to protect my privacy without locking a door. I can't handle locking. You two act like I'm the problem. But she's the one opening the door without knocking." His mother gasped softly as if I'd cursed at her. "I told you I'm forgetful," she murmured. "I'm 71, dear. My memory isn't what it used to be." She pressed her fingers to her chest, "But I never expected to be accused of spying on you in my own son's home." The way she said it, you'd think I'd dragged her from the street and forced her to live with us. He seized on it immediately. You hear how you sound, Sylvia? He pointed at me again, that same finger that had ordered me to apologize. You're accusing her of spying over a door that you could just lock. My chair felt suddenly too small, my body too visible. I became acutely aware of my faded jeans, the soft tank top where my skin folded at the waist, the way my hair, more gray than brown these days, was pulled into a loose bun. I'd never felt more like a stranger at my own table. If I could lock it, I would, I said. I've said that again and again, but instead of trying to meet me halfway, you make jokes about me being weird, and she walks in like she owns every room. His jaw tightened. She is my mother. She helped us with the down payment on this house. She's staying here temporarily. Show her some respect. My laugh came out thin and humorless. Respect goes both ways. He slammed his palm on the table. The plates rattled. The pot roast shifted in the dish. That's enough, he said. You're making her uncomfortable. I looked at her. She wasn't uncomfortable. She was smug. Her lips trembled just enough to keep up the act, but her eyes gleamed, satisfied, as if she'd been waiting for him to say exactly that. All my words dried up at once, because in that moment, sitting under that cold white light, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. It wasn't just that she didn't respect me. It was that he didn't see me at all, not as a partner, not as someone whose boundaries mattered, just as the crazy, oversensitive wife making a fuss over a door. I'm not apologizing, I said finally, each word steady, even though my hands were not. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not going to say I'm sorry for trying to feel safe. His face darkened. If you're going to keep acting like this, maybe you shouldn't be here when she is. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. The idea of leaving my own home so his mother could roam the hallway without knocking felt like a bad joke with no punchline. I lifted my glass, more to give my fingers something to do than because I was thirsty. The water was lukewarm, tasteless. I took a small sip, then set it down carefully, scared my shaking would show. I'm not leaving, I said, but I am done asking nicely. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I folded the dish towel and laid it next to my plate, smoothing the edges until they were painfully straight. A strange calm settled over me, thin but solid like ice, forming on the surface of a lake. It means, I said, meeting his eyes, then hers, that if your mother insists on opening that bathroom door without knocking, she's going to have to live with whatever she sees on the other side. The next morning, she knocked. It was the lightest little tap, like she was just brushing her knuckles against the door. And then the handle turned immediately, as if the knock were only a technicality. I was at the sink rinsing my face, fully dressed, toothbrush lying on the edge of the porcelain. I watched the doorknob move and felt my spine stiffen. The door opened a few inches. Her head appeared in the crack, gray curls set perfectly, lips pursed. "Oh," she said, eyes skimming over me. "You're in here." I straightened, water still dripping from my chin. "Yes," I answered, because the door was closed. She didn't step in, but she didn't close it either. She just stood there with the door half open, letting the cooler hallway air spill into the small bathroom, watching me as if I were the one interrupting her. "I just wanted to grab my moisturizer," she said. "You know, the one I left in the cabinet." "There's another bathroom downstairs," I replied. "You can use that one." She blinked, slow, like she was processing a foreign language. Then she smiled, that same small, tight smile. "No need to be so tense, dear. We're all adults here." Her gaze drifted past me to the mirror where she could see both of us. For a second, our eyes met in the reflection. Hers were cool, almost amused. Then she opened the door wider and reached past me to the cabinet, her wrist grazing my shoulder. I stepped aside, jaw clenched. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll try to remember to knock earlier next time." She left the door half open when she exited, as if to remind me she could always come back. I closed it the rest of the way with more force than necessary. The sound echoed in the little room. I stared at my own reflection, the water on my skin catching the weak yellow light above the mirror. This is deliberate, I thought. She wants me to react. She wants me to be the crazy one. By the time I went into the kitchen, she was already there, standing at the counter in her robe, stirring sugar into her coffee. The morning light through the window was soft and pale, making the dust motes float lazily in the air. It should have felt peaceful. It didn't. "Good morning," she said without turning around. "Morning," I replied, heading for the cupboard. "Sleep well?" she asked, voice light, conversational. "Fine," she chuckled. "You sounded restless around 3. I heard you walking." Of course you did, I thought. You're listening for me. Before I could answer, my husband came in, tying his tie, the glow from his phone screen still on his face. "Hey," he said, kissing his mother's cheek first, then mine on the way to the coffee pot. "Morning," I murmured. His mother sighed. "You boys and your gadgets," she said fondly. "I was just telling Sylvia she sounded restless last night. I hope everything's okay." He glanced at me over the rim of his mug. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "She gets nervous when doors are closed," his mother added in a stage whisper that wasn't soft at all. "Even bedroom doors." He laughed, a short bark of sound. "Mom, don't start." "I'm just saying," she replied. "I'm not used to such sensitivity about normal things." I put a bowl on the counter harder than I meant to. It clinked loudly, making them both look at me. "I'm right here," I said. "You don't need to talk about me like I'm not." His mother lifted her hands. "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. You know how families are. We share. We don't lock each other out." He took a sip of coffee and grinned. "See? That's what I said." The two of them, side by side in that cool morning light, looked like a unit. I felt myself outside of it, standing on the wrong side of some invisible line. "You keep saying that," I said slowly. "But what you call sharing is me having no privacy in my own home." He sighed, exasperated. "Here we go." She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Let it go, dear. She's in a mood." I swallowed my words. They sat at the table talking about his work and her renovations, the smell of coffee filling the kitchen. I ate my cereal in silence, each crunch impossibly loud in my own ears. Later that day, I was wiping down the hallway console when I heard her voice carry from the living room. There was a slight echo because she had the speakerphone on. "No, you don't understand," she was saying. "I opened the door and she was standing on the toilet. On the toilet, Gloria, arms up, facing the wall. It was unnerving." I froze, cloth in hand. A burst of laughter crackled from the phone. "What was she doing up there?" Another woman's voice asked. "Is she all there?" "I don't know," my mother-in-law replied, lowering her voice just enough that she probably thought I couldn't hear. "She says it's because she's nervous about the door, but honestly, if you saw it, you'd think something was wrong. I'm afraid to go down the hallway sometimes." I stepped into the doorway. She was on the couch, legs neatly crossed, her robe replaced with a cardigan, the phone on the coffee table in front of her. She looked up when she sensed me. Her expression didn't change. I walked in, picked up a magazine, and walked back out without a word. Behind me, the voice on the phone said, "You should be careful staying there." And my mother-in-law murmured, "I know," with a theatrical little sigh. That night, when my husband came home, I was chopping vegetables for dinner. The overhead kitchen light was bright and stark, turning the countertops into a stage. He leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. "Mom said you were listening in on her call with her friend." I set the knife down. "She had it on speaker in the middle of the living room." "You walked in," he countered. "It's my house. I live here." He shook his head. "She thinks you're doing it on purpose now. The poses. Whatever." I wiped my hands on a towel, then turned to face him fully. "She is walking in on me, repeatedly, after I've told both of you why I don't lock the door. So I decided if she insists on opening it, I'll give her something to see. Fully clothed. Nothing harmful. Just something to remind her that she's crossing a boundary. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Do you even hear yourself? You sound unhinged. I sound tired, I said. There's a difference. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me with that same mixture of annoyance and pity that made my skin crawl. You know she's telling people you're doing weird rituals, he said finally. She's worried. I let out a short, disbelieving breath. She's not worried. She's stirring things. She's 71, he repeated, as if her age were an explanation for everything. She's not used to this kind of behavior. This kind of behavior, I asked. You mean refusing to be walked in on in the bathroom? He sighed. You could at least meet her halfway. Try to make her feel comfortable while she's here. I'm supposed to make her feel comfortable while she opens doors on me? I asked. You hear how that sounds? He pushed off the fridge and stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're making it hard, Sylvia, for everyone. Thanksgiving is tomorrow. My sister and her kids are coming. Mom is already anxious. Can you please just stop whatever you're doing and act normal for a day? Normal, I repeated. You want me to be normal so your mother can pretend she didn't violate my privacy all week? He clenched his jaw. I want peace in my house. Then ask her to knock, I said. He stared at me, eyes narrowing slightly as if he were trying to decide whether I was being difficult on purpose. I'm not arguing about a bathroom door the night before Thanksgiving, he said. If you can't handle using the lock like an adult, at least avoid provoking her. He walked out of the kitchen without waiting for my answer. The next day, the house filled with voices and footsteps. Warm light from the oven spilled into the dining room as I moved back and forth, carrying dishes, refilling drinks, forcing a smile when nieces ran past my legs. My sister-in-law, Carla, arrived with her husband and 2 kids, her cheeks flushed from the cold outside. Hey, she said, hugging me quickly. Smells amazing in here. Thanks, I replied, adjusting a tray of rolls. In the corner of the living room, my mother-in-law sat in an armchair, a shawl draped over her shoulders. Carla went straight to her, leaning down to kiss her cheek. How are you settling in here? Carla asked. Oh, I'm managing, my mother-in-law said, voice soft but just loud enough to carry. It's lovely to be with family. I just wish I felt safer sometimes. Carla's face creased. Safer? What do you mean? I paused in the doorway, holding the gravy boat. My mother-in-law glanced at me, then quickly looked away, as if she'd been caught saying too much. Nothing, she murmured. It's just, I've been walking in on some strange things. In the bathroom. Carla's eyebrows lifted. Strange things? She's just different lately, my mother-in-law said, standing in corners, doing odd movements. I don't know, it unsettles me. Carla's eyes flicked to me for a second, searching my face. I forced a neutral smile and walked past them, placing the gravy on the table. Mom, don't start, my husband muttered, coming up behind me with the turkey platter. I'm not starting anything, she replied, but her tone was injured. I'm just saying I don't always feel comfortable. Comfortable how? Carla asked, not dropping it. Like, physically? Or, let's eat, I cut in. Everything's getting cold. We sat down. The table was crowded with dishes, candles flickering warmly in the center, their soft glow fighting against the colder ceiling light above. It should have felt like a holiday. It felt like sitting on top of a fault line. Halfway through the meal, my husband clinked his glass with his fork. I just want to say, he began, I'm grateful to have everyone here. And I'm especially grateful that Mom can stay with us while her place is being fixed. His mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Oh, sweetheart. And, he added, smiling a little too tightly, I hope we can all make this a peaceful visit. No drama, no misunderstandings, just family. I felt every eye turn to me for a fraction of a second, like a breeze passing over skin. I took a sip of water. My hand trembled against the glass. Later, while we were clearing plates, Carla came into the kitchen, rolling up her sleeves. "Need help?" she asked. "Always," I said, forcing a smile. We worked in silence for a minute, stacking dishes, rinsing them under the running tap. The warm water was a small relief on my cold fingers. "Hey," she said quietly, when the others' voices had faded into the living room. "Is everything okay between you and Mom?" I set a plate in the rack. "Why?" "She's been saying weird things," Carla replied, "about walking in on you, making it sound like you're doing something odd." I let out a slow breath. "She's been opening the bathroom door without knocking. A lot. I told her and your brother that I can't lock it because of some stuff from when I was a kid, so I decided if she keeps opening it, she's going to see some poses she can't explain." Carla blinked. Then, to my surprise, a small laugh escaped her. "You're serious?" "Completely." She shook her head, still smiling a little. "Honestly? That's kind of brilliant. But you know she's going to milk it, right? She loves being the victim." "I noticed," I said. Her smile faded. She lowered her voice further. "Just be careful. She knows how to make people take her side. She's already hinting that she doesn't feel safe here. And you don't want that turning into something bigger." A dish slipped slightly from my soapy hands, clattering against the sink. "Bigger how?" Carla hesitated, glancing toward the doorway. She told me earlier she might have to talk to someone about the situation. I thought she meant a friend, but then she mentioned getting things on record in case something happens while she's staying here. The room seemed to close in for a second. The warm air from the dishwasher suddenly felt suffocating. "On record?" I repeated. Carla nodded, biting her lip. "I'd talk to your husband tonight, before she does." I turned off the water, my hand dripping over the sink, because if his mother was planning to turn my own home into a place where I was officially considered unstable, then the bathroom door was the least of my problems. I didn't grow up in a house where doors stayed closed. In the little duplex where I spent most of my childhood, privacy wasn't a concept so much as a luxury no one believed children deserved. The bathroom door never fully shut because the frame was bent from humidity. My brothers would run in and out, chasing each other with stolen socks or toy cars, the air thick with the smell of dial soap and steam from the old pipes. My mother used to laugh it off. "We're all family," she'd say, passing by with a basket of laundry. "Nothing to hide in this house." But there were things I needed to hide. The trembling in my hands when the door clicked by accident. The way my breath became tight whenever someone held a doorknob while I was on the other side. After my brother locked me in that bathroom and held the door for what felt like forever, though it couldn't have been more than a few minutes, something shifted in me. Even now, decades later, the memory sits in my chest like a small stone I keep tripping over. I remember the bathroom floor was cold that day, tiny blue tiles with darkened grout lines. I was 5, sitting on a step stool, humming to myself while brushing my hair. He was 8 and bored, which was always a dangerous combination. He slid in quietly, shut the door behind him, and leaned his full weight back against it. "Let me out," I'd said, holding tight to my little pink brush. He laughed and twisted the lock. It wasn't even a real lock, just a flimsy button you pushed in. But the sound of it sliding into place felt like a lid sealing shut. When he stepped out and pulled the door behind him, he kept his palm pressed flat to the wood. I banged on it until my throat burned, tears dripping onto the stool. Those minutes were enough to carve something in me that never healed quite right. When my mother finally opened the door, scolding him half-heartedly, she didn't see me sitting on the floor, my small body stiff with panic. She didn't see how long it stayed with me, how every closed door afterward seemed to echo. As I grew older, privacy never became any easier. In my 20s, living with roommates, I'd pretend I was fine, leaving the bathroom door cracked or avoiding showers when I didn't trust who was home. I never explained it. People don't like broken things. They prefer small quirks over real fractures. When I met my husband, I thought I'd finally found someone who understood gentleness. He was patient back then. If I changed behind the closet door or asked him to stand nearby when I washed my face, he didn't tease. He'd wrap his arms around me, resting his chin on my hair, murmuring, "It's okay, I'm here." I clung to that version of him the way some people cling to old photographs, evidence that softness once existed. Money was tight in the early years. We lived in a basement rental where the bathroom had no lock at all, just a doorknob that spun loosely. I'd wedge a towel under the door to keep it from swinging open. He'd knock, every time, and wait for me to tell him I was done. Sometimes he'd even announce himself jokingly before entering the hallway so I wouldn't panic. It made me feel seen. Later, when we finally bought this house, I remember standing in the hallway the first night, touching each door frame as if blessing the place. The bathroom door had a working lock, a simple, functional one. "Try it," he'd said, flicking the switch. "See? Smooth. No sticking." But the moment I heard the click, even though he was right beside me, a rush of heat climbed up my spine. I touched the lock again, softer this time, trying to breathe through the memory that still lived under my ribs. "We don't ever have to use it," he'd said gently, taking my hand. "Whatever makes you comfortable." I believed him. Life settled for a while. I worked long hours at a grocery store, stocking shelves, climbing ladders, lifting crates of produce. My hands toughened, my knees ached. But I built a life out of small victories, paying off credit card debt, saving enough for a decent emergency fund, finally being able to replace the broken toaster. I kept our home running. I cooked, cleaned, managed bills, remembered birthdays, replaced light bulbs, scheduled roof inspections, clipped coupons, cooked meals for his coworkers when they came over. I never bragged about it. I'd grown up believing that effort should stay quiet. You keep the house together and let everyone assume it happens naturally. When my father got sick, I drove 2 hours each way to help him, stopping at pharmacies, handling paperwork, watching a man once so tall shrink behind hospital curtains. My husband visited twice. He said hospitals made him uncomfortable. I told myself it was fine, that not everyone could manage sickness. I didn't realize until much later that he simply didn't like showing up for anything that wasn't easy. After my father passed, I kept one thing of his, an old weathered tool belt. Not because I needed it, but because it smelled faintly of cedar and engine oil, 2 cents wrapped around almost every memory of him fixing things around our childhood home. I kept it in the linen closet far back behind folded towels, where I could touch it on days when my hands wouldn't stop shaking. It reminded me I wasn't always afraid. It reminded me someone had once kept me safe. That tool belt would become one of the anchors I carried quietly through the years, though I didn't understand that yet. My husband's mother never approved of me. At first, it was small things, polite comments with pointed edges. She'd say things like, "I suppose we can't all keep houses like mine," or "Some women just aren't natural hostesses." She'd run her finger along my windowsill during a visit, inspecting for dust. She'd give me cookbooks for Christmas with sticky notes marking easy beginner recipes. I learned early on that making her comfortable meant shrinking myself. She liked people who folded around her, voices quiet, opinions optional. For a while, I tried. I laughed politely when she criticized my job. I accepted her suggestions about curtains, spices, even the way I ironed shirts. I let her rearrange my pantry during one visit, pretending I didn't mind that she'd moved everything from where I could reach it to where she preferred it. She'd clap her hands together afterward and say, "See? Much better." But the bathroom thing started years ago, long before I understood what she was doing. She'd visit for holidays and knock lightly before opening the door, barely waiting for me to say, "Just a minute." Sometimes she'd stare directly at me while saying, "Oh, I didn't realize you were in here." Never embarrassed, almost curious. I'd step aside, avoiding her gaze, feeling that old heat rise in my chest. It wasn't the nudity that frightened me. It was the intrusion, The choice to enter a space where I was vulnerable, knowing I couldn't bear to lock her out. And every time I mentioned it to my husband, his response was the same casual shrug. She didn't mean anything by it. You're overreacting. The first time he said those words, something inside me folded. Not snapped, not shattered, just folded, quietly, like paper. I started adjusting my routines, showering at odd hours, holding the doorknob with one hand while brushing my teeth, timing my bathroom breaks around her naps during her visits. I made myself small, predictable, easy to overlook. That was always my method of survival. Anticipate intrusions before they happen. Years later, when she moved in temporarily for her home renovations, I told myself it would be fine. I could manage. It was only a few weeks. I could adapt again. But age had changed me. I wasn't the same girl who learned to be invisible. I had spent too much time bending, breaking, smoothing myself down to keep peace. When she began opening doors again with her flimsy knock-and-enter routine, something in me resisted in a way it never had before. The humiliation of being observed, framed as unstable, whispered about on speakerphone, it all scraped against older wounds I'd spent decades hiding. And yet, even with all that, there were memories that softened me more than I wished they did. When our marriage was young, he used to warm my hands in winter by rubbing them between his palms. He'd call me bird bones because of how small my wrists were. He'd cook pasta at midnight when I came home exhausted, insisting I sit while he stirred the pot. He'd tell me, "You carry too much. Let me carry some." I wanted to believe that man was still in him somewhere, buried under years of comfort and habit. But memories can be dangerous. They can make you forgive things you shouldn't, excuse behaviors you'd never tolerate in anyone else, stay inside rooms where the air grows colder each year. As I stood in that kitchen the night before Thanksgiving, dish towel in hand, I realized how many versions of myself had been built around other people's comfort. Childhood Sylvia, who hid her panic. Young adult Sylvia, who kept the bathroom door ajar. Newlywed Sylvia, who apologized when startled. Caregiver Sylvia, who drove hours for her father. Wife Sylvia, who took on every burden quietly. But middle-aged Sylvia, this version of me, was starting to see the price of years spent yielding. And that slow realization, that hardening clarity, began long before her bathroom door ever opened. It began the moment I understood that no one was coming to knock for my sake. Not then, not now, maybe not ever. I just didn't know yet how far that truth would carry me. Thanksgiving ended long before anyone left. The table was still crowded with empty glasses and half-eaten pie slices, but the atmosphere had thinned into something brittle, something stretched too tight to touch. My husband and his sister were gathering leftovers, the soft clatter of utensils echoing through the house. Their mother sat in her armchair again, a blanket over her knees, watching everyone with an expression of delicate concern, as though she were the victim of a long, exhausting ordeal. I moved around them quietly, stacking plates, keeping my eyes down. My shoulders felt tight, my breath shallow. The warm glow from the dining room lights made everything look gentler than it felt. The contrast stung. At one point, my husband brushed past me to reach for a container. He didn't say excuse me. He didn't even look. His body bumped mine just enough to make me step aside. A small humiliation, but it lodged itself in me like a splinter. Later, as people were putting on their coats, I overheard his mother speaking to Carla again near the front door. "I'm managing," she said softly, "but I just never know what I'll find when I walk through a hallway. It's unsettling. And with my age, well, I don't feel as steady as I once did." Carla murmured something sympathetic, but her eyes flicked toward me with a worried crease. The implication wasn't subtle. I was a danger. Not physically, perhaps, but unpredictable, unstable. My husband didn't correct any of it. When everyone finally left, the house fell into an exhausted silence. I stood in the kitchen, wiping down the counter, trying to steady my breathing. The harsh overhead light buzzed. A faint smell of cinnamon lingered on the air. He entered with slow footsteps, leaning against the doorframe. "You embarrassed me today," he said. I kept wiping the counter, not looking at him. "I didn't do anything. You created tension. You made Mom uncomfortable. You acted off." I stopped wiping. The cloth went still in my hand. By existing in the same house as her? He pushed himself off the frame and walked in, arms crossing. By acting strange about the bathroom again. You brought this energy into Thanksgiving, and now my sister thinks something's wrong. "So do you," I said quietly. He didn't deny it. That was the first cruelty. The second came moments later. "You need to apologize to her," he said, "before she leaves tomorrow. She's shaken. She thinks you might retaliate or something." The word hit me so hard I nearly dropped the cloth. "Retaliate?" He shrugged, as if it were a reasonable thing to suggest. "I don't know. She said you've been unpredictable. She doesn't feel safe knocking anymore." My throat tightened. She doesn't feel safe knocking, so she enters without knocking. He sighed, walking past me to open the refrigerator. The cold light spilled out, washing the kitchen floor in pale blue. "God, Sylvia, why do you twist everything? Just drop it." He reached for a container of leftovers, some turkey he didn't even heat before eating out of the cold dish. His carelessness made something heavy settle in my chest. "Did you ever once tell her to stop walking in on me?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just ate another bite. I watched him, the cold refrigerator light outlining his profile. His indifference had weight. It was astonishing how a single silence could feel louder than an argument. He finally closed the fridge and said, "Just let it go. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be." That night, I lay in bed awake long after he'd fallen asleep beside me. His breathing was slow and deep. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the room shift around me. The soft yellow light from the street lamp outside cut a thin line of illumination across the ceiling fan. I traced it with my eyes again and again, trying to quiet the storm inside my chest. At some point, I slipped out of bed. I didn't want to think, I just walked. The hallway felt cold against my bare feet. I passed the bathroom door, the one that had caused all this trouble, and paused. I didn't go inside. I just stood there, looking at it. For a moment, I imagined turning the lock. I imagined the sound. I imagined standing inside the room alone, safe. But even imagining it sent a wave of heat through my body, followed by that familiar tightness in my throat. I stepped away quickly, pressing my back to the wall. When I returned to bed, his arm draped over my waist as though nothing had changed between us. His hand rested on my stomach heavily, the weight of it pinning me to the mattress. I stared into the dark until morning. The next day, I made coffee for both of us and set his mug in front of him. He didn't look up from his phone. He didn't say thank you. Another small humiliation, disguised as nothing. His mother came downstairs wearing a lavender sweater and an expression too soft to trust. She greeted him warmly, kissed his cheek, then turned to me with a polite nod. "Good morning," she murmured, her tone neutral enough to pass for civility. I returned the greeting out of habit, not warmth. She sat at the table, stirring sugar into her coffee. The spoon clinked against the mug in an irritating rhythm. She looked at the steam as if reading something in it. "I spoke to Gloria again last night," she said casually. "She's concerned about me staying here." I steadied my hand on the counter. My husband glanced up. "Mom." "I'm not trying to cause trouble," she said, placing a hand on her chest delicately. "I just want to feel safe." My husband's jaw tightened. He turned toward me. "There, you hear that?" A rush of cold passed over my skin. "Safe from what?" I asked. She shrugged helplessly. "I don't know what you might do." My breath caught. "Do?" Her lips quivered, almost imperceptibly. "All I know is that you've been behaving erratically, standing on furniture, facing walls, whispering." It frightened me. I was not whispering. "You were doing something," she said, "and I don't feel comfortable guessing what it was." I took a step forward. You walked in on me. You opened the door without knocking, multiple times. She flinched. The kind of flinch people do when they want to appear wounded. I told you I forget. I'm not well. That wasn't true. She remembered everything that benefited her. My husband stood now, palms on the table. This has gone too far. Mom feels unsafe. She's talking to people. This could affect us. There it was, the threat disguised as concern. What people? I asked. Her doctor, he said. A counselor. Maybe even someone from the community center. She just wants this documented in case something happens. My heart lurched. In case something happens? He didn't blink. Yes. I felt my knees weaken for a moment, a tremor running down my legs. I held onto the counter so I wouldn't sway. There was a heaviness inside me then, something slow and sinking, a realization that what was happening wasn't just petty discomfort or annoyance. Something larger was being built around me, an image, a narrative, a quiet question of sanity. She wasn't trying to embarrass me anymore. She was trying to define me, an unpredictable woman, a danger, a problem to be managed, and he was helping her. Later that afternoon, I found her in the hallway standing outside the bathroom again. The door was closed. No one was inside. She simply stood there, hand hovering near the knob. I approached slowly. "Do you need something?" She startled, then smiled faintly. "Just checking to see if it was occupied." "It isn't." "Oh." She nodded but didn't move away. We stood there in a silence so sharp it felt like it stung. The hallway was narrow, lit by a single overhead bulb casting harsh white light. Her shadow stretched long across the carpet. She took a small step closer to the door. I watched her hand rise toward the knob again. "That's not your bathroom," I said. "You have your own downstairs." She paused, hand hovering. Then she turned her head slightly. "I prefer this one," she said, "because it's closer." "To me," I said. Her smile returned, thin and cold. "To the kitchen," she whispered. Another silence fell, this one long enough for my pulse to thrum visibly at my throat. She opened the door halfway, peeked inside, then closed it again carefully. She stepped aside only after finishing her inspection, as though verifying something about the room. I felt something inside me bend, not snap, bend. That night after dinner, I sat on the edge of my bed, the soft lamplight flickering beside me. I felt the weight of the day like a coat I couldn't take off. My fingers trembled when I reached for the blanket. I thought about the tool belt in the linen closet, untouched for months. My father's hands worn into the leather, his quiet strength, the feel of cedar and old metal. I thought about how he used to knock before entering any room, even his own. My breath shuddered. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to ground myself. Then I heard footsteps outside the bedroom door. They paused. The handle turned slightly, not enough to open the door, just enough to test it. I froze. The room fell silent again. No footsteps retreating. No explanation. Just the long, breathless quiet of someone waiting on the other side. That was when I realized something hadn't just bent inside me. Something was breaking. The handle turned a second time. The second time the handle turned, something inside me stopped being afraid and started listening. Not with my ears, but with a deeper part of myself. The part that had survived childhood bathrooms, years of shrinking, years of being told I was overreacting. I sat perfectly still on the edge of the bed, the lamplight stretching a thin golden line across the carpet, my breath shallow but steady. The door didn't open. It held its place, barely rattling, as though someone on the other side was testing how much pressure they could apply without making noise. Then came the softest sound, a whisper of fabric shifting, the faint exhale of someone adjusting their stance. She was standing there. The realization should have frightened me. It didn't. I felt the fear fall away molecule by molecule, leaving something colder behind, something clearer. as if a layer of fog that had clung to me for weeks suddenly lifted and I could finally see the shape of the thing pressing in around me. I rose slowly and walked to the door. My hand hovered near the knob, not touching it. I didn't want to startle her. I wanted to understand. "Are you looking for something?" I said quietly. "Or someone?" There was a silence so dense it seemed to push against the door. Then footsteps retreated, light, measured, almost graceful. Not the scurrying of someone caught, the retreat of someone who wanted me to know she'd been there. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. It was empty. The overhead bulb hummed faintly. The air felt colder. The bathroom door at the end of the hall was half open again, though I'd closed it earlier. I walked toward it. My feet moved without hesitation now. Inside the bathroom, the cabinet door had been left ajar, not enough to look intentional, just enough to force me to wonder. I closed it gently. As I stepped back into the hallway, my husband appeared at the top of the stairs. His expression was irritated, as though I'd interrupted his evening simply by existing. "What are you doing up?" he asked, voice thick with annoyance. I studied his face, the crease between his eyebrows, the way he avoided looking directly at me. For the first time, I didn't feel the instinctive urge to explain myself. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let him stand there in his impatience. "I heard someone at the door," I said. "It was probably the heater." "The heater doesn't test doorknobs." He sighed dramatically, rubbing his forehead. "Mom said you might try to drag her into something tonight. She's scared. She said you've been acting off." I felt something settle in my chest then, solid and immovable. "She's lying," I said. He froze at the bluntness of it. Maybe he expected pleading or defensiveness or apology, but I felt none of those things. My voice didn't shake. He opened his mouth to respond, but I raised a hand. "Don't," I said quietly. "Not tonight." He looked stunned, as though I'd broken some unspoken marital rule. "I'm going to bed," he muttered, brushing past me. "You do that," I said. He stopped for a moment, maybe expecting me to chase the conversation the way I always had, but I didn't move. I stood in the hallway until he disappeared into our room and closed the door behind him. Another silence followed, different from the others. Not heavy, not suffocating, just still. I went to the linen closet and reached to the back shelf without turning on the light. My fingers found the familiar worn leather of my father's tool belt. The smell of cedar rose lightly as I pulled it into my hands. For years I'd told myself I kept it out of sentiment. Now I understood it had been something else all along, a reminder of a kind of steadiness I'd forgotten I could have. I carried it back to the bedroom and set it beside the lamp, running my thumb along the frayed stitching. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It wasn't even symbolic in the moment. It was simply grounding. I crawled into bed but didn't sleep. In the pale hours before dawn, I heard her door open downstairs, light footsteps traveling slowly up the staircase. A pause at the top, a shift of weight, then the unmistakable sound of someone waiting again outside my door. But this time I didn't hold my breath. I didn't shrink. I let the presence sit there, pressing against the silence between us. I whispered into the dark, "I know what you're doing." The footsteps moved away quickly that time. When the sun rose weakly through the blinds, washing the room in a soft gray light, I sat up and felt something unfamiliar pooling in my chest. Not fear, not anger, clarity. I got dressed slowly, choosing a long-sleeved shirt, jeans, warm socks. My hands moved with deliberate steadiness. When I opened the drawer to put the tool belt away, I hesitated, then kept it out, placing it on the dresser where it was visible. For the first time in weeks, the house didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a place where a line had finally been drawn. When I walked out to the hallway, the bathroom door was fully open again. Light from the small frosted window spilled onto the tiles in a pale rectangle. I walked past it without pausing. The kitchen smelled of stale coffee. My husband sat at the table with his phone, already scowling, but I didn't brace myself this time. His mother was at the counter, stirring tea, watching me over her shoulder with that same delicate concern she wielded like a blade. But now I could see the blade, and now I knew it had always been aimed at me. My husband cleared his throat. "She's waiting for your apology before she leaves." I poured myself a cup of coffee, the mug warm against my palms. I didn't look at him. "I won't be apologizing," I said, my voice calm and flat. "Not today, not ever." The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was final. She flinched first, he flinched second. And I stood there in the cool morning light, coffee mug steady in my hands, realizing I had finally stepped out of the corner I'd been pushed into. But the clarity didn't mean safety, because she picked up her phone next, slowly, deliberately, and dialed a number I couldn't see, turning slightly away from me as she lifted it to her ear. And when she spoke, her voice was soft, frightened, performative. "Yes," she whispered. "It's me. I think it's time we talk about what's been happening here." She ended the call when I walked past, but she didn't do it in a hurry. She pressed the screen slowly, watching me the whole time, as if she wanted me to know there had been a conversation and I'd simply arrived too late to hear it. The phone lay face down on the table afterward, her fingers resting lightly on the back of it. My husband cleared his throat. "Mom needs some space this morning," he said. "She's upset." "I heard," I replied. He shifted, uncomfortable. "She talked to someone about what's been going on, just in case, so it's documented." There was that word again, documented. I nodded once, as if he'd just told me the weather report. Then I poured my coffee and walked out of the kitchen without another word. My legs felt steady. My hands didn't shake. The fear was still there somewhere, but it was buried under something sharper now. In the bedroom, I sat at my dresser and pulled open the top drawer. The old spiral notebook I'd once used for grocery lists lay underneath a stack of scarves. I took it out and flipped to the first blank page. The date, the time, the exact words. "I think it's time we talk about what's been happening here." I wrote it down in small, controlled letters. I wrote how she'd turned away as she said it, how he hadn't questioned who she was calling. Then I went back. 3 weeks. 4. I wrote every time she'd opened that bathroom door, how many times I'd explained my history with locks, his responses, her forgetfulness, the hallway conversation on speakerphone, the hints about safety, every detail I could remember. I didn't know yet what I would do with it, but if she wanted things on record, then I would have a record too. Later that afternoon, when my husband left to run errands, I texted Carla. "Can we talk without your mother or my husband?" "Just you and me," she replied almost immediately. "Yes, coffee shop on Oak at 4. I agreed. Before leaving the house, I opened the linen closet and touched my father's tool belt again. For a second, instead of comfort, I felt a strange wave of shame, as if he'd be disappointed that I'd let anyone make me feel unsafe in my own home for this long. I closed my eyes, exhaled slowly, then let my hand fall away from the leather. By the time I reached the cafe, the sky was a flat, dull gray. The place was half full, students with laptops, an older man reading a newspaper, a young couple sharing a muffin. Carla was already there, cupping her drink with both hands, eyes on the door. She stood when she saw me. "Hey," she said, her voice low. "You look tired." "I am," I answered. No point pretending otherwise. We sat. She waited for a moment, trying to find a gentle way in. Then she gave up on gentle. "Mom called me last night," she said. "She said she's worried about staying with you. She said you're acting strange and she doesn't feel safe." I stared at the tiny swirl of foam on top of my latte. "What did she say exactly?" "That you've been doing odd things in the bathroom," Carla replied. "Standing on toilets, facing walls, holding your arms up. That you won't lock the door and then blame her for walking in. She said she's afraid you might, I don't know, snap? That if something happens while she's there, she wants people to know she tried to get help." I let out a slow breath. "Did you believe her?" Carla hesitated, then shook her head. I believe she believes herself, she said, but I also know how she operates. She tells half of a story, sprinkles in fear, and lets people fill in the rest. She's building a case, I said. Feels like it, Carla admitted. She told me she might talk to her doctor about concerns regarding your mental state. She said she doesn't want you to hurt yourself or anyone else. For a moment, the noise of the cafe dropped away. I pictured a file somewhere with my name in it, written in her shaky script, framed by her version of events, an unstable wife, a threat. I've never hurt anyone, I said quietly. I know, Carla replied, but she's good at sounding reasonable. She'll say she's just worried. People believe worried older women. I looked up at her. Will you? I won't, she said, but I'm your sister-in-law, not a judge. If this becomes official, she trailed off. We sat in silence for a moment. I forced my voice to stay level. If someone ever asks, can you tell them you saw what was actually happening? That she was the one ignoring boundaries? Carla nodded. Yes, I can say that. I've seen her walk into rooms my whole life like walls don't apply to her. Will you say it if my husband is in the room too? I asked. She hesitated this time. He's my brother, she said, but I won't lie for him. Not about this. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was more than I'd had that morning. When I came home, the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. I found my mother-in-law in the hallway outside our bedroom, wiping the door frame with a damp cloth. A plastic bucket sat beside her feet. What are you doing? I asked. She didn't flinch. Just cleaning, she said. This area looked a little, neglected. She smoothed her hand over the wood, lingering near the handle longer than necessary. My eyes dropped to the bucket. Among the rags and spray bottles, I saw a zip-top bag holding several orange pill bottles, my medication, the generic label with my name clearly visible. They'd been on my nightstand that morning. Why are my prescriptions in your cleaning bucket? I asked. She followed my gaze, then smiled faintly. Oh, those! I moved them. They looked untidy on your table. I was going to organize them for you. You were going to organize my prescriptions? I repeated. Someone has to, she said. You take quite a few. It worries me sometimes. All those chemicals. People can get confused. The word hung in the air between us. Micro-shock. Sharp. Clean. Precise. I bent down, picked up the bag, and held it in my hand. Don't touch my medication again, I said. Ever. I was only trying to help, she replied, sounding wounded. If someone were to come in and see all those bottles lying around, they might get the wrong idea. What idea? I asked. She shrugged delicately and returned to wiping the frame. That you're struggling more than you think. I carried the bag to the bedroom, closed the door, and set the pills back on my nightstand in a neat row. For the first time, they didn't just look like a part of my routine, they looked like props in someone else's story, waiting to be photographed. I took out my phone and snapped a picture of the bottles on the table, of the date and time on the screen. Then I opened my notebook and wrote down what she'd just said. If she wanted to turn my life into evidence, I would gather my own. That night, after my husband fell asleep on the couch with the television flickering blue across his face, I sat at the dining table with the notebook open and my father's tool belt beside it. The belt lay heavy and inert, the buckle reflecting a sliver of light from the fixture above. I wrote a short message to my husband on a blank page, then copied it into a text before sending. For my own clarity, I'm writing down what's been happening. Your mother has repeatedly entered the bathroom without knocking, despite my trauma history. She has told others I'm unstable and unsafe, and is talking about making official reports. I need you to acknowledge that this is happening and that it's not okay. I stared at the words for a moment, then hit send. He read it a few minutes later, still half lounging on the couch. I watched his face in the washed-out television light. His thumb moved on the screen, then stilled. He didn't look at me. A soft vibration on the table. His reply. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Mom is just worried and trying to help. Maybe you should talk to someone before this gets worse." There it was. The line between concern and accusation crossed in one sentence. I didn't answer, but I took a picture of that message too, the blue bubble glowing on my phone screen. The next day, I called my doctor's office. "I need something documented," I told the nurse. "I have a history of trauma related to being locked in confined spaces, bathrooms specifically. I avoid locking doors when I'm inside. It's not that I'm careless. It's a long-standing issue." She listened quietly, then said, "We can add a note to your chart, and if you'd like, the doctor can write a brief summary explaining it, in case you ever need it." "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." It felt strange, asking for a document about myself, but if someone was going to write a version of me into their records, I wanted at least one page in the world that told the truth. When I hung up, my husband walked into the room. "Who were you talking to?" he asked. "My doctor," I replied, getting my own version on record. He frowned. "You're making this adversarial." "I didn't start it," I said, "but I'm not going to stand here empty-handed while your mother paints me as a threat." "She's scared," he insisted. "So am I," I answered. "The difference is, she has you." He didn't know what to do with that. He opened his mouth, closed it, then shook his head and left the room, mumbling something about drama under his breath. 2 days later, Carla texted again. Mom called me. She said she might invite someone over to assess the situation at your house. "Did she tell you?" "No," I wrote back. "Be careful. If she brings a neutral person, it will be someone she's already convinced." The rubber band stretched another inch inside my chest. That afternoon, as I was wiping down the kitchen counters, I heard her voice in the next room, low and measured. "Yes," she was saying on the phone. "Thank you for agreeing to come. I just don't feel comfortable anymore. I'd rather have a professional see it with their own eyes. Tomorrow at 7 works." I didn't move. I stood there, hand still on the damp cloth, listening to the scrape of her chair and the soft click of her phone ending the call. She stepped into the doorway and found me standing there. For once, she seemed surprised. "Oh," she said. "I didn't realize you were in here." "We share walls," I replied. "I hear things." She smiled, serene. "Then you know someone's coming tomorrow evening, just to talk, to make sure we're all okay." "Who?" I asked. "Someone from the community center," she said. "They work with families. They help when there are concerns." Her eyes were too bright. "Good," I said. "I'll be here." She blinked, as if she'd expected resistance. Then she nodded, smoothing her cardigan. "Of course." When she left the room, I went straight to the bedroom. I pulled out the notebook, the printed note from my doctor's office that had arrived in my email that morning, and the photos on my phone. I arranged everything on the dresser next to my father's tool belt. The belt looked different now, not like a comforting relic, but like a question. What would he do if someone tried to dismantle his life from the inside? I didn't know the answer, but I knew one thing. I would not walk into that meeting with empty hands and a trembling voice. That night, I texted Carla. She invited someone from the center for tomorrow at 7. "Can you come by then? Just for coffee. I might need someone else in the room who knows how she really is." There was a long pause. Then, "I'll be there." The next day moved slowly, every hour stretching itself thin. I went through the motions, laundry, dishes, answering work emails, but everything felt like waiting. At 6:45, Carla arrived with a box of store-bought cookies and an overly bright smile. "Thought I'd drop these off," she said loudly, as if she were an oblivious sister-in-law rather than a witness. My husband hovered near the hallway, hands in his pockets, eyes restless. His mother sat in her armchair again, shawl perfectly arranged, hair brushed, expression carefully exhausted. At exactly 7, the doorbell rang. My husband straightened. My mother-in-law smoothed her sweater and pressed a hand to her chest, as if steadying herself for something delicate. Carla glanced at me. I wiped my palms on my jeans, took one steadying breath, and walked toward the front door, where a stranger's silhouette waited behind the frosted glass. When I opened the door, the person standing on the porch looked nothing like the neutral mediator my mother-in-law had surely imagined would confirm her story. She'd likely hoped for someone soft-spoken, someone malleable, someone who entered the house already believing her trembling voice. Instead, a woman in her late 40s stood there. Shoulders straight, her coat still buttoned against the cold. She held a clipboard, but she didn't look like someone who could be easily guided into a narrative. There was a steadiness in her eyes, alert, unhurried, and impossible to mislead. "Hello," she said, offering a polite smile. "I'm Marlene. I was asked to stop by and speak with the household." I stepped aside, letting her in. "Thank you for coming." My mother-in-law appeared almost instantly, moving into the foyer with the soft shuffle of someone who wanted to look fragile. "Oh dear," she said, clutching her shawl. "Thank you so much for coming on such short notice. I didn't want to bother anyone, but the situation has been so unsettling." Her voice quivered. I watched Marlene's eyes flick briefly to the performance before settling back into neutrality. "Of course," Marlene said. "Why don't we sit somewhere comfortable?" We led her into the living room. The overhead light was off, so only the standing lamp near the armchair lit the room. A warm but uneven glow that pooled around my mother-in-law and left the rest of us in softer shadow. Carla sat on the couch, her expression mild but attentive. My husband stood behind it, hands in his pockets, shifting restlessly. I sat in the chair opposite the armchair, my notebook tucked beneath my thigh, the printed doctor's note slipped inside it. My father's tool belt lay in the hallway on a shelf, visible but unobtrusive, its worn leather catching a sliver of lamplight. I hadn't planned to leave it there. I simply couldn't bring myself to put it away, and now it rested like a quiet reminder of something that used to hold me together.